even after the chaos that was Copenhagen, the environment and politics, it would appear, remain happy bedfellows. If anything, the environment is becoming more and more political. Hello and welcome to this week's show. On an international level, getting countries to cooperate in the fight against climate change is proving next to impossible. UN Climate Chief Ivo de Boer tells Frans van Kat that the summit in December back in Denmark was nothing but a fiasco. What's more, emissions reductions submitted by countries for the January deadline leave a lot to be desired. So are things progressing more on a local level? Well, as elections loom here in France, the French president is here in Corsica to talk about sustainable development. On this island, known for its rugged and naturally and still largely cement-free beauty, ecology is versing the economy, and the protection line has yet to be definitively drawn on the sandy coastline. We'll be looking at these local and international political and environmental issues before turning to the rise of eco-terrorism. Last April, for the first time ever, the FBI put a domestic terrorist on their most wanted list. He was a 31-year-old animal rights activist, and as you will see, he was not alone. French President Nicolas Sarkozy has promised to make Corsica an example of environmental excellence for the rest of Europe to follow. On this, his third visit as head of state, he's looking at how to avoid forest fires and optimise the island's natural resources, looking for action on a local level. Internationally, things are moving slowly, to say the least, with targets for emissions reductions put forward by countries for the January deadline representing nothing new.
In mid-December, world leaders agreed on a deadline to officially announce climate change action plans. That deadline was supposed to be on the 31st of January.
I got the targets from the United States. Europe is coming in, China, India, Brazil, Mexico, South Africa, Korea. So a host of numbers coming in.
You had the proposal from the United States. What is this proposal?
The proposal is a 17% emission reduction by 2020 and then much more ambitious subsequent targets for later years.
17% by 2020. The United States maintained the same objectives as 6 weeks ago. Other world polluters, like India, vowed to reduce its carbon intensity by 20 to 25% compared with levels in 2005. And China announced a reduction by 40 to 45%. For many experts, it's not enough.
Yes, Copenhagen was not a success. Copenhagen was a mess.
Of course, I am, as many others, very disappointed that we did not get the binding targets in Copenhagen.
Next major step, Cancun in Mexico, where new discussions are expected to take place at the end of the year.
Progress then on an international level is proving problematic. So what about smaller scale initiatives? Well, here Corsica has 1,000 kilometres of rugged coastline. Measures have been put in place to maintain them, but the protection line isn't always respected. So should perhaps more power be given to local authorities? Well, the answer is far from simple. Still pining for their pine forest, Nicole and Vincent remember days gone by when this spot, just a few kilometres from the city of Ajaccio, was still a wonderful wilderness.
Vincent, don't you remember when families from the town would come out here on Sundays to picnic?
20 years ago, this was no man's land. It was wild. It was beautiful.
The pine forest felled to make space for a hotel, cabins and caravans invading the sands, attracting swarms of tourists throughout the summer months, a holidaymaker's paradise that doesn't want to let the cameras in.
Do you have the right to film here?
It's public property.
The security man says that the area is now private property and that we need to leave or he'll telephone the hotel owner.
I call the owner and we'll see.
In Corsica, the coastline is a turbulent topic. Vincent and Nicole have been threatened and insulted in the past because of their efforts to keep construction to a minimum. As we drive away, the security man follows us, so we make a U-turn.
Whoa, he's angry. Oh well, too bad.
Developing the coast is an environmental but also an economic and political issue.
The mayors find it difficult not to give in to pressure from voters.
And to prove that they're not just a grumpy old couple, Vincent and Nicole introduce us to 3 younger Corsicans who are also working to keep the coast cement-free. For them, this hotel, for example, is totally out of place. There is a law to protect the coast in Corsica, but it's not always respected.
There's a certain amount of friendly favours done,
And there's also a mentality to avoid upsetting certain people.
Making the law all the more difficult to respect. At the Regional Planning Office, the message is clear. No building should be built on areas deemed to be remarkable, but the definition of what is remarkable remains fuzzy.
Remarkable, it's true, isn't a scientific definition. There's a law that gave a generic idea of what it stands for. Beaches, swamps, lagoons are all remarkable areas. But the definition of remarkable is indeed the point of debate.
A passionate debate that raises temperatures. Developers continue to see the value in constructing on the island. However, to its environmental advantage, 25% of Corsica has already been cordoned off by the state to be preserved as nature reserves. Well, some believe that lightening the rules on the protection for the environment would help the economy and so might not be the worst of worlds. Here behind me, people have taken the visit of the President as an occasion to protest against rising unemployment in Corsica and the increasingly difficult standard of living. The economy getting them onto the streets, however, more and more it's the environment that gets people out to act, sometimes to the extreme. In the UK, last month, government officials lifted extreme environmental activists alongside Al-Qaeda-inspired terrorists. Mainstream environmental groups were, naturally enough, quite upset.
They all have in common concern for nature, but that's where the similarities end. Environmental activists today come in many forms, with different aims and different methods. The most radical are the eco-terrorists, direct action partisans. They operate for the most part clandestinely, and the FBI considers them to be an internal threat as great as radical Islam. Among their number, the Animal Liberation Front, notorious for its attacks on research laboratories.
They have a history of attacking human targets. They also plant explosives in pharmaceutical factories.
Less radical but also given to direct action are anti-globalization activists. While they've embraced many ecological issues such as the battle against GM ordinances, green concerns have not always been a central plank in their campaigns. With momentum now flagging, some activists believe a greater green focus may unite the movement again.
Our big challenge today is to see if the platform of climate change justice could be a point of convergence for all our forces. Because out of that, you could get a movement.
And then there are the most high-profile of the environmental campaigners, the institutions such as Greenpeace or the World Wildlife Fund, big organisations that oppose violent action but advocate civil disobedience. Their preferred methods combine publicity stunts and lobbying. Environmentalism is now firmly a part of the mainstream. Thousands of groups and hundreds of thousands of sympathisers gather under the green banner. Though they have considerable media clout and a recognisable political identity, their stances can often be confused and conflicting. The result is that when it comes to decision-making at the highest levels, the green cause is often relegated to second place.
Well, we leave you now with pictures that some analysts say are an example of radical ecology. In case you missed it, these pictures are from James Cameron's film Avatar. The blockbuster tells the story of a futuristic indigenous people who have their natural and magical home destroyed by greedy capitalists. A strong message that some in France say could even sway the French voter. Indeed, back in June, the French gave massive gains to the Greens in the European elections, motivated, it was said at the time, in part at least, by the film Home. Well, I'll leave you to chew on that, and I'll see you back on the mainland next week for a new edition of Environment.